The Western Kentucky University Department of Political Science and the Political Engagement Project welcome you to League of Women Voters of Kentucky Fair Maps Forum. I am Saundra Ardrey, coordinator for the Political Engagement Project, your host for tonight's webinar. I, like many of you, am not too familiar with the process of legislative redistricting. I am not so familiar with the political maneuvers and strategies that go into the decision of how to draw those district lines. But here's what I do know, that we want transparency in the process. We want a fair map, one that guarantees all citizens and residents full representation. Fair representation that allows for the protection of our rights and the fair and equitable distribution of resources. That is the bottom line. We are excited to partner with the League to become more knowledgeable so that we can proceed to act. I now turn it over to Dee, League of Women Voters of Kentucky.
Thank you. My name is Dee Pregliasco. I am Vice President of the League and Chair of the Redistricting Committee. And we want to thank her, and we want to thank WKU's Department of Political Science and the WKU Political Engagement Project. Because they're serving as the local partner for this effort. And we are so glad that they're doing so because we're having this League of Women Fair Maps webinar in Bowling Green. So thank you so much. Before we begin, let me share a few guidelines for this webinar. In order to ask a question or make a comment, please use the Q&A function. Feel free to ask questions or comment throughout the program. We want you to ask questions. We really do want you to ask questions. The moderators will field questions and comments for the panelists. League members serving as moderators include Weta Meyer of Bowling Green, Karen Brown of Union in Northern Kentucky, and Cindy Heine of Lexington. And we appreciate that. Let's get started. You see the first page. This is the title, People Powered Fair Maps. These are the basics. So this is pretty critical to understand this, but actually almost all of you may know this, that using the 2020 census data, and we know that all of that's come out this year finally, it comes out obviously every 10 years. Kentucky redistricting will decide our congressional seats, of which there are 6, our Senate seats, state Senate seats, of which there are 38, and 100 Kentucky House seats, as well as many judicial, city, county, and school board seats. And to give you an example, in Louisville, Kentucky, we have a metro district and we have 26 metro council members. So they will have to redraw those lines too, just like all of these other district lines are going to be drawn. Next.
Before you go to the next slide, could you answer a question from Samantha?
Sure.
Her question is, what would you consider a community of interest? I know there are definitions, but I wonder if a college campus would count as that, or a town.
Certainly a town, a city could be a community of interest. And colleges generally, though, are part of the city where they are. And what is hard to give a specific answer to that is the fact that some people who are in college vote at where they actually live, and some, based upon age and how long they've been there, they may be signed up to vote at the college location. Other communities of interest are actually, besides cities and towns, are localities such as a county or a section of a county. Maybe the county is divided by a river. Maybe it's divided by an interstate. So those could be communities of interest. And then, of course, minority groups are communities of interest also. I hope that helps. All right, when is redistricting going to happen? All right, fall right now, is it happening? We have actually tried to get it to happen sooner in the sense of having an advisory commission. which I'll talk about in a few moments. But we presume that the legislature, which has the sole power in Kentucky to draw these new lines, is working on it right now. But there has to be an actual bill saying these are the lines. And so we expect that that's going to officially happen in early January of 2022. Actually, they're going to have to move quickly, or they're going to have to move the January 7th filing deadline because it's doubtful they can get all of those maps and everything done to make it okay for people to know, well, here's where I live. Can I file for office for this particular office based on where I live, or are they going to change the lines? So that's critical. Actually, they could take action later in 2022. In other words, in the regular session, they could do this in February, March, or April for the 2024 elections, as opposed to the elections that'll take place next year, 2022. Next. All right. What's important is that redistricting, and let me sort of digress here for a moment. Most everybody knows the word gerrymandering. So put these two together. Gerrymandering is bad redistricting, but redistricting is actually the process of drawing the lines. So it can make it easier or harder, depending on how it's done. And you can see it right here. Can voters learn easily about the candidates? Can citizens who are voters going to be able to communicate easily with their representatives? What about parties competing against each other? That's really good if there are parties, that it's not just a single party system. So that could be important. And then members of racial minorities elect candidates that they prefer. And of course, going back to the last question, communities of interest would be able to elect candidates they prefer. And that sort of goes into the last one that's listed. Regions within a state they have distinctive interests, and those interests should be considered. So Western Kentucky is different than Eastern Kentucky. South Central Kentucky is different from Louisville. Northern Kentucky is different from Louisville or different from Eastern Kentucky. In other words, those distinctive interests should be considered. Next. All right, why should you care? Probably the critical thing to remember, besides the fact that this redrawing happens every 10 years, and if it's not done right, we can't change it for 10 years. It's important that voters, you, the voters, should elect your representatives rather than they elect us or they select us. In other words, we should be the ones making the choices. What happens if not, in safe districts, what we learn and find out when we talk to people all over the state, and it's true all over the country, elected officials don't feel like they have to compromise. They go, okay, I'm not going to have any competition, so I don't have to compromise. I can do what I want to do. And we know that this has led to polarization and gridlock, which is true all over the state and all over the country. And then poorly drawn lines can lead to costly lawsuits. And the latest one was in 2012. But when we began doing research about this, some of these cases go all the way back to 1907, which was only 8 years after Kentucky's Constitution went into effect. And then there was another one in 1931, and then there have been 4 or 5 since then. So we don't want that. That costs money for everybody. Next. All right, what's the best approach? Well, actually, the best approach would be to have an independent commission. But in Kentucky, we would have to have a constitutional amendment to have an independent commission that, not the legislature, but an independent commission that would draw these lines. About 17 different states have those independent commissions. So the next best would be an advisory commission, and we helped support legislation both in 20 and 21 in the legislature to have an advisory commission, and it was rejected by the legislature. And also they rejected even having a joint resolution, which we supported, to have this commitment, the same thing that basically an advisory commission would do, a commitment to open and transparent process. not in the basement of the Capitol in a dark room, not without people knowing what's happening. And then also have public hearings and input. So that's behind what we're doing with these Fair Maps forums. They're a form of public hearing, and we want input from everybody. Next. All right, we have been drafting maps. You're going to hear from Susan Perkins Weston in a moment, who's been working tirelessly on drawing draft maps because we bought the same technology that the legislature uses, which is called Maptitude. And what we did is take the 2020 census data, develop these maps both for Congress, the Senate, and the House. And so we're using them to do these three very, very important things. Inform all of you all, our fellow Kentuckians, about how these maps can be fairer and simpler, even just to look at them. And then we also want you to, and this is what we're doing, to advocate for fairer, simpler maps that reflect public input. And this public input should come just like we're doing tonight with this Fair Maps Forum. It should be input that comes with discussions that you have with your legislators from your area and other citizens. Get people involved. We know that civic engagement is one of the critical things that can keep our democracy going the way that it should. And then we're also gathering input, as I've just mentioned, at all of these events. And then we're going to go back and develop recommended maps. And we're going to show these maps after we've gotten your input, share these recommended maps with the legislature later this fall. Next. All right, we have to follow legal rules. One person, one vote is a rule that a lot of people have heard about. They're not sure exactly what that means, but it's pretty easy to understand that everybody's vote should count. Okay, and in the Congress, based upon those, for those particular districts for Congress, they should be as close to perfectly equal as possible. And you'll see when we've drawn our maps that that's the case. For purposes of the Kentucky Senate and House seats, based upon our Constitution and our law, they have to be within a 5% range of perfectly equal sides, 5% more, 5% less. Also, the rules provide that there should be opportunity districts or districts of opportunity. And again, where minority voters particularly have a chance to select their representatives. And then county lines. The counties are not to be divided except when needed to create nearly equal districts. And when Susan shares the maps, you'll see how well we did this. Because unfortunately, what's happened in the past is once they divided a county, then they divided it more than just saying, okay, we're going to divide it in two. It gets divided 2 and 3 and more times. And that's not good for those counties. Next. All right, we had some additional goals that we aim for when we looked at the maps and then are drawing the draft maps as well as the recommended maps. They should be compact districts. We want to have parts of a district in easy reach of one another. And then county seats become really important because we really don't want to divide a county if we don't have to. And give you a perfect example, we've had one of these Fair Maps forums in Hopkinsville, and the people in Hopkinsville are very, very in tune for the fact that they have, even though it's a compact city, okay, it sort of goes to a sort of a community of interest idea when you think about it. They have 3 different representatives. And so their school could be in one district, their church in another district, where they work another district. And then who knows where they're, in that sense, okay, where do they live? Which of the 3 districts do they live? That doesn't work. It dilutes their power and dilutes their vote. And then when we also drew these, we did them with indifference to incumbents. We just designed the districts to fit all the rules and our additional goals, and we didn't pay any attention to how it might affect current legislators. Because again, we want the voters to choose their legislators, to choose their representatives, not vice versa. Next. All right, to show you, and I'm sure that you all are aware of this because you're right there in the I-65 corridor, but there's been some huge population changes in Kentucky from 2010 to 2020. And be sure you can go online and see this map and look at it even more closely if you want to. We've shown the percentages of population change, but the I-65 corridor, the I-75 corridor, and of course, both of those are crisscrossed by the I-64 corridor, show the greatest gains in population for the state. Now, we're really lucky we're not losing a US congressman like we did in the 90s. We used to have 7 and now we only have 6. But a lot of counties in Eastern Kentucky have lost population. Some counties in Western Kentucky. And you can look at these dark red ones, which includes Warren County, of course, a gain of more than 9%. So it is going to be a real, shall we say, a real hard thing to do to draw these maps and protect incumbents, because probably in Eastern Kentucky and maybe even Western Kentucky, they're going to have to draw the maps. And so they might have 2 incumbents living in the same district because of these population shifts. Next. Okay, so these are our current congressional districts, and Susan is going to talk about these maps. These district maps are going to need some provision, but this shows you what the current congressional district looks like. Take a moment and look at that. Does it make sense? Does it seem simple? And then, of course, the question is, does it seem fair the way that it's drawn? The first district goes all the way from the west by the Mississippi and the Ohio River all the way over to Eastern Kentucky. Look at your district number 2, okay? Look at those, it almost looks like a dog with floppy ears, okay? Is that the way it should be? Look at 4. 4 includes some of Jefferson County, because our population in Jefferson County is as big as it is. And so we're going to have some connection to District 4, but should it go all the way over to Boyd County and Ashland? Is that what really should happen? So part of what's going to happen is look at these maps, and Susan is going to talk to you about all of them, including this one, and what we've been doing with our draft maps. And if you have any questions about any of these, please go to the Q&A and answer questions, because we want not only your questions, but we want feedback. So Susan, I'm turning it over to you.
Yes. Good evening. I'm Susan Weston. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters Redistricting Committee. I'm talking from Danville, Kentucky, which is located in Boyle County. And if you're not familiar with where Boyle County is, it's in the 2nd Congressional District with Bowling Green. We're the 2nd or 3rd farthest east county in that district, so we know where you are. And I wanted to give you that sense of how that district spreads out. I will mention in this map, I think Warren County is absolutely central to why it's so odd. Because if this district was drawn to put Warren County and Daviess County together, and once you do that, it's quite a job to get enough people to be in that first district if it doesn't have either of those 2 major cities. So I'll switch over to the moment of inviting your input. We really do want to hear from you. We have the definite option of you using the questions now, but we would love to have your feedback on what looks good, what could be improved on every one of the maps. So we have set up a survey form. It's at that tinyurl.com address, which is tinyurl.com/LWVmaps. We would love to have you sign in there, give us your email, which we will use only as an identifier to be sure you're a real person. It's not going in any of our databases for contacts afterward, but it will let you come back if you decide to give us more feedback later and put in the email address, and we'll know it's you twice. Other options, you've got the Q&A option. You can just email us notes to info@lwvky.org. That'll work. You can come back and use the form anytime between now and November 15, which is basically when we're planning to go ahead and try to do an updated set of maps based on all the input. I'm going to pause for a minute in case any of you are partway through signing in on that. And I'm also going to mention that in the chat box, we've shared where you can get a complete set of handouts showing all the maps we're going to discuss tonight. I always prefer to be able to be looking at the handouts while people are talking and shifting from one place to another, looking at what interests me rather than the exact thing chosen by the presenter. So if you download those maps, you have that option as well, and it'll let you ask me tougher questions, I suspect. So let me move on to show you the first of the maps we worked on drawing. This is another way to do Kentucky's 6 congressional districts. And let me let you just sort of absorb approximately how it works. I'm trying not to call these the same districts as the one we have because I don't want to connect them to the incumbents. So I refer to the green district there as the Western district. That southernmost yellow district, which includes Bowling Green, as the Southern district. The purple one is Eastern, the blue one is Northern. And then the one that includes Lexington is Central, and the one that includes Louisville is called Jefferson, which I think is pretty reasonable given how much Jefferson it is. Let me let you have another quick look at that before I turn over, and I'm going to show you close-ups of where things had to be divided to make this map fit the legal requirements. So as Dee said, Jefferson County is too big to be a congressional district. If it got its own district, it would violate the one person, one vote rule. So nibbles have to be taken out of Jefferson County. I went for little nibbles. So for the yellow Southern Congressional District, there's a little piece of Jefferson County added. And for the Northern District that includes Boone and Kenton and Campbell County, there's a little piece up in the northeast, nibbled off, which gets Jefferson County down to the size it ought to be. 3 other counties had to be divided. Grayson County, a little north of you, including Litchfield, is where I put a split between within a county to get the Southern District right up to the size it should be. And then the 2 other splits are in Harrison County in the north, which is split between the Northern and the Central districts, and in Montgomery County in the east, split between the Central District and the Eastern District. These are not perfect lines, but they're the set I could put together well to start us off. I do want to show you a note about revising these maps. Dee had mentioned Maptitude, which is state of the art. The truth is that halfway through drawing these maps, my Maptitude software hit a glitch, and it was going to take all of Labor Day weekend to get a response on how to fix it. So we've done these maps using the District R software available online, which lets us use 2020 census data, and it lets us use block groups. That means bigger units than individual census blocks. And that means we could get these districts quite close to exactly equal districts, but not quite close enough for congressional maps. You can see in how we've done it, when I can divide by census block, it will be fully possible to get the precise numbers that are needed. But our recommended maps later this fall will go back to Maptitude. We'll use census blocks. We'll get very, very close to exactly equal districts. Now, what I'd like to do is back up to the main map for a minute and pause and really extra invite you to ask questions. And if my fellow panelists decide to jump in on me, that will be fine too. I'll also share the logic of how the congressional district that includes Bowling Green got to looking so different. The crucial thing, of course, was moving Daviess County into the Western District, which allowed us not to have a district that wanders below Bowling Green and halfway across the map. I think that's noticeably more compact. And then the second goal was that Northern District, not reaching all the way to Ashland, which required moving the Eastern District, sort of rotating it counterclockwise to get it to fit well in the space. I see Ron Kistler's question where he asked, were these districts equal back in the day? When the maps we live with now were drawn, they were very, very close to having equal population in the 6 congressional districts. That was based on 2010 census. The new map is drawn with the 2020 census numbers. So it's close, and I will be able to get it closer when I can work with the individual census blocks. Thank you for the question. And I've got a Daviess County. Oh, good. Glad to have a Daviess County person. We brought Daviess County maps. So Judy says, as a resident of Daviess County, it looks good to me. Don't know what the ramifications of losing Bowling Green will be. And I don't either. That certainly will relocate it. And Chuck Webb asked, currently, is it the party in power, Republican representatives determine the redistricting lines? Simplest answer is yes. Slightly longer answer is the redistricting will be done by legislative bills, which means they need consent from both chambers of our legislature. And then the governor has a say in that he can either sign or veto, but the Republican majorities in both chambers are big enough that they can override vetoes. So it will be effectively the current party. I will mention that we're going to be looking in a minute at the Kentucky House maps. And it's worth remembering when I point out some things I think of as weaknesses in the House maps, that those were drawn by Democrats who controlled the House back in 2013, the last time we did the redistricting. And I've got Jeannie Smith asking, do the districts take into consideration future population growth? And the answer is no, it really doesn't, because we're required to use the census data as it was done. So we're working from who was enumerated last year, and enumeration is the word right from our Constitution. So this is very much current numbers. I've heard some people say where you have a choice in a district, it's going to be a little over or under, maybe consider the way the trends are going, but I haven't figured out really how to do that. And for the congressional maps, the US Supreme Court is pretty firm. Really try to get it into hundredths of a percent close to exactly equal. And now I'll go back to letting the moderators ask the questions. I was trying to avoid silence.
That was terrific. It was great to catch them as they came. Thank you.
Yes. I don't know that I can do that consistently, so I rely on the great helpers to help us be sure we're responsive in this helpful and also unhelpful format.
Susan,
yes.
Would you explain the approximate number of citizens in each district and how that's determined?
Okay. 2 layers. The census counts are the one and official authority for what the numbers are. Kentucky, in the most recent census, had very, very close to 4.5 million. Like, I think the number may be 4,500,000 and 5,000. I have no. So these districts are north of 700,000 each, and they're quite close, but not perfectly close in size. When we move on to the Kentucky House, we'll be looking for 45,053 is the perfect number. And the Senate perfect number is 118,000 and change.
One more question for Dee or Susan. Ron says, so are legislators likely to adopt this?
Probably not as is. They might take some suggestions from our ideas. What do you think, Dee?
Well, we're hoping that they are aware of, and we are pretty sure they know what we're doing, and we've been pushing this public input. So what we have to hope for, and of course, hope isn't a plan, but hope that they will put out their maps earlier rather than later. In other words, not at the last minute. And if they do it so we have time to comment and people still have time to comment, that would be great. But who knows? Because they are in charge, and they're going to be sure they keep all the power.
Yes, we will add that we've got some advocacy suggestions at the end, not so much to push our maps as to push for the maps to be fair and workable for the voters. So we'll give some ideas where if you want to raise your voice for maps that are easier to look at and work better for voters and work better for your community, we will very much appreciate your help. So let me leave Congress behind and take you to have a look at Kentucky House maps. So in your packet and here, this is the current official map for Kentucky House districts. With 100 districts, it's kind of hard to look at. And in fact, when you first look at it, you think a bunch of those look pretty compact. A bunch of those look like they might make sense. But then it helps to zoom in and start looking at what's happening in the divided counties. I'm guessing folks from Bowling Green have a sense of what happened to Warren County. I'm guessing folks from Owensboro and Daviess County also have some sense of how that works. But let's try a close-up. So here's Warren County. And it's fairly simple to pick out the 20 at the bottom, pointing to the 20th House district, which is centered on Bowling Green. But the odd things take up when you notice there's more yellow on the map than the Bowling Green district. There's also in that 22nd district at the bottom showing Simpson and Allen, it crosses into Warren County twice. Once from Simpson and another time from Allen in sort of a balloon. And working back counterclockwise to Barron, Barron took a little nibble off to get up to having a district that was large enough. And then Edmondson has multiple pieces of Warren, and Butler has a funny twisted portion of Warren, and then the Todd and Logan district also took a nibble. Now, some of this is because Kentucky has this notable rule about not dividing counties unless you have to. And what that produces is, if your county is larger than a House district can be, you have to be divided. So there's a legislative temptation to solve every challenge in drawing the maps by taking little bites out of those dividable counties. I think, having worked on this for a while, that the bites didn't have to be that confusing. That simpler is really a live possibility in drawing the maps.
We have a question for Dee or Susan. This comes from Chuck. Do you know if the next legislative session of 2022 will those three ideas to have a more unbiased advisory committee to make the redistricting decisions be submitted once again to the state legislators?
This is Dee again. Sorry. We are planning on backing any proposed legislation that would set up an advisory commission for the future. Even though we haven't gotten one for this time, we're going to plan ahead for 2030 to have an advisory commission. And it may take till then to get one, but we're still going to be working on it.
I would add, I think it's going to be very hard to get anything changed for how the redistricting is done this time, because the clock is ticking pretty fast for legislators to actually get districts into place. I did also bring the Hardin County division, which I think looks a little wilder than the Bowling Green division. So here you have a blue district that starts up near E-Town and runs all the way to the Tennessee border. And you have a yellow slice coming from Grayson that wanders way over through part of E-Town. and a green district that wanders over through parts very close to E-Town, and a little sliver taken out to go with Meade County, and a big slice taken out to go with Bullitt County. You don't want me to show you what happened to Bullitt County. This is enough of a demonstration of once a county is being divided, how intensely it can be divided and how complicated the lines can look. I don't know what all the purposes of this were. I will emphasize that Democrats in the House had the dominant role in drawing these, whereas the Senate maps we'll look at in a little bit were put together primarily by the Republicans who dominated the Senate at that time. Our draft maps are a bid not to create complications that complicated. We are sharing them in 7 regions, which you'll sort of recognize here. And I'm going to share 3 of them with you to focus us a little more on the places where you'll have the strongest input. So we're going to look heavily at that southern region that includes Warren County, but also a bit at the western region, at the southwestern region that includes Bowling Green, and at the southern region that goes all the way over to Somerset, and also a bit to the west, which will give us a look at Daviess County, which is one of the divided counties. I do want to mention, if you want to see all the other ones, you can go to LWVKY.org and see all of them, and we'd love comments on all of them. But to not have this be map after map after map after map after map after map after map, we did make a choice about where we thought you might have the strongest thoughts to share and the most important questions. So here's zooming in a little on our western region. And in this map, Warren has 2 districts of its own. One of them is centered on Bowling Green and the other is a bit south of there, and shares a district with Edmondson and shares a district with Allen and Monroe. And Hardin also has its own district centered on Elizabethtown and shares with a couple of other counties. If we have anyone from Barron County, it's worth mentioning that your population growth makes your county the right size to just be its own district. That's the simplest arrangement there can be, is to have it work that way. Zooming in a little closer on Warren County, you can see here what the divisions look like, with the yellow district entirely in Warren and the light green district below it entirely in Warren. And then a dark green district that's shared with Allen and with Monroe a little further east, and the orange district shared with Edmondson. I hope this looks less confusing than the map you have, and I welcome every thought you can send me about how to make it work even better for folks who live in your territory.
Susan, we do have a question.
Right.
Warren County has a 2020 population that can fit 3 Kentucky House seats that satisfy the plus or minus 5% rule. Why have you not chosen to draw 3 districts? Okay.
I'll back up a minute and show you this region a little better because it's easier to talk about what happens. Let me get the map back to the previous regional map. The difficulty is I have to make maps that work for the other counties too. So when you look at Allen and Monroe and Greene at the bottom, they don't add up to a district. And there isn't another county they could have had added to them that would have gotten them up to the right size. That's why I took a piece to make that district at the bottom work. Edmondson could probably have partnered with another district, but other parts of the map would have gotten difficult, including making Hardin as coherent as it is. It is flat out true that under Kentucky's rules, the large counties are used to solve problems. For the smaller ones, I'm trying to minimize that, but it's nearly impossible to skip the move of using some of the big county sections to make the districts work for other counties. And it's hardest as you move further west in the state because you start hitting both the northern and the southern borders, which reduces your options. I will add a word about this county rule. what our state constitution says is make 100 districts and don't divide any counties. Now, of course, if you don't divide it all, it's impossible to get anywhere near one person, one vote. So once the US Supreme Court said the constitutional equal protection rule means you can't just have completely uneven districts. The Kentucky Supreme Court said, okay, we'll put the two rules together. Make close to equal districts within 5% and divide the smallest number of counties you can. In this map, like the previous legislative map, 2 counties have to be divided, not because of their size, but because they don't have anyone nearby they could be in a district with without dividing somebody. Callaway County creates that. Nobody who neighbors them is small enough to make a district with them, and they're not big enough to be a district by themselves. So one of their neighbors has to be split up, which also makes for craziness.
Susan, we have one more question.
Okay.
From Jeannie. I live in the proposed light green district. Is a seat being added here?
Oh, that takes a trick to think about how to answer it. A simple answer is Bowling Green, Warren County is enough bigger that there's going to have to be another district somewhere nearby. I don't quite want to call it added because for the whole state, there will still be only 100. But there will be fewer districts in the east. I think there will be one fewer district further west of you. So I think the right solution is to have a second district that's entirely in your county, given how big you are. The legislature is not required to go by my opinion, and they might create some other kind of districts to account for your population that would also have close to the right size. But yes, you're seeing an important change brought on by Warren County having some of the biggest growth in the entire Commonwealth. If you want to ask me a follow-up question, if I didn't get that clear, please do.
Well, and while she's considering the follow-up question, let me ask you one clarification, Susan. And the slide at the beginning, legal rules we followed, the first one was one person, one vote with plus or minus 5% allowed. The next is opportunity, districts of opportunity. And then the third one is county lines. So if that's the priority sequence, then maybe missing districts of opportunity need to be provided in the state that meet the other criteria. And then
okay.
as in so many cases, counties can be split where they need to be to provide those districts of opportunity.
That's thinkable. That's an interesting way to reason, but it has this problem. That's a rule that is specifically tied to the Voting Rights Act, which in turn is tied to racial equality and rules from the 14th Amendment. And there is not a sufficient population of any non-white racial group in Christian County or the nearby counties to create a true district of opportunity at that level. There's being intentional and aware about it, but Kentucky is so white. It's not like the kind of redistricting they're doing in Georgia or Pennsylvania or Ohio in terms of what's possible on those opportunities. If somebody spots a way to make one, I'll be delighted. The ones that are on this map are heavily concentrated in Jefferson and a little bit in Fayette. But there isn't a way to carve any of the other counties that would produce a district with a voting majority for a non-white group. There's relative openness and relative not openness, but there isn't the formal kind of district of opportunity possible, except in our 2 largest counties.
I see what you're saying. These lines for the yellow district in Bowling Green, for example, actually in the current map, and in this sort of draft, which I know is draft and subject to significant revision. There are minority neighborhoods that have been cut in half. And then there are, I think, are also some questions about school districts that are potentially separated. So maybe this is something that folks in the region can continue to look at, think about, and sort of explore with additional tools and consider additional possibilities.
And I would love to hear thoughts on that. I do see, I'm going to jump to Jeannie's question about if immigrants, new citizens would be districts of opportunity. Not if they aren't a distinctive racial group for the legal purpose of the really technical term district of opportunity. Now, if you talk about communities of interest and boundaries to pay attention to and not cross casually, yes, an immigrant group would be a group worth paying a lot of attention to make sure they aren't unduly divided and they have their best chance to have an influence. But it wouldn't be the legal district of opportunity under the Voting Rights Act. Boy, y'all ask good ones. That's why I jumped to that, because I really liked it. Here's the Hardin County division a little closer. Let me go back up here with an E-town district put together well. And I will say, connecting Meade County to anyone is very hard. What happens to Radcliffe and Vine Grove in every map I've looked at is bad. Let me step over to show you another current map with its twist, which is actually kind of nice for Samantha's question too. This is a monster. This is a monster that includes the districts that serve Pulaski and Laurel counties, that's Somerset and London, and they go every which way. So Pulaski County is sharing with Cumberland, Clinton, and Russell. It's sharing with Wayne and McCreary. It's sharing with Lincoln, and it's got a district that is also part of Laurel. And Laurel is at the point where the map makers ran out of colors. So the 82nd is shared with Whitley, and then the 86 is shared with Knox, which looks like it's the same. And the 90th goes off and works with Clay and another county. And then there's a district that includes Jackson and parts of Madison, as well as parts of Laurel. It's a huge thing. And the thing that Laurel County people have said to us is, we had a long time where we had no legislator who lived in Laurel County because of how we were butchered. So that's part of why I brought the Southern map, to have another chance for you to look at it. And this was a major simplification for Pulaski and Laurel. They each have two other districts that connect, two districts that connect them to other counties, but it's only two, and there's definitely a Somerset district and definitely a London district. Now, I did see that there was a question which has slipped away about Berea.
Susan, I tried to answer that for you, and I directed her to our website for maps of Central Kentucky. And I told her I believe that Berea is within one district on your draft map.
I think so, and I am confident that can be true when I can do it with the census individual blocks. A difficulty, I will say, is it is a district that is shared with several other counties. It's not mainly in Madison County, because the trouble with the rule that prioritizes county seats is you end up not prioritizing the other major cities in a county. So I wanted to show you that much of the Southern map to give you an idea of what happened. And again, we want your input. And I'm going to leave this up so you can go there if you didn't before, and I'll take other questions if we have them. Okay, I'll try. Tracy had asked, would any of the proposed federal legislation regarding voting rights affect current redistricting effort? And the answer is definitely yes. A pivotal issue will be whether we can restore a form of pre-clearance by the Department of Justice. When the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, it selected districts with a history of voting rights abuses, states with voting rights abuses, and said, in those states, if you change laws that affect voting, you need pre-clearance from the Justice Department, and that included how they did redistricting. When the Shelby v. Holder case was decided, that pre-clearance process got knocked out, which means now if there's a problem with districts, it looks like a constitutional issue, you have to go to court to change it. You can't have the Department of Justice say, hold it. So if any of the voting bills pass, I think we will see an improvement in how this is done, where legislators are more careful in the way they were 2 decades ago, rather than the way they were in the most recent redistricting. I also see the Corbin question, which says City of Corbin has pieces in 3 counties. How have you accounted for this? I was able to put Knox, the Knox County portion, and I hope I got the fullness of the Laurel County portion together. Whitley and Knox are now each so big because of that I-75 growth that I couldn't put all 3 together because there wasn't a reason to split up Knox County or a reason to split up Whitley County. So I sort of got 2/3 of the puzzle pulled together. And I'm very aware of that because Corbin people chase me on a steady basis. In other parts of my life, when I'm working on education, they say, counties aren't our main thing. So that's a bit of a challenge. So again, we would love to have any input you want to share at the Tiny Earl address, and email and notes are great. And these comments are fantastic. So please do keep them coming.
Susan, if I can interject here, this is Dee again. One of the things that makes all of this really difficult for people to think about is, and it's interesting that the Corbin people are not focused on counties. We have 120 counties, and that's part of what makes this as difficult as it is. Now, that's not going to change certainly in our lifetime, but that's certainly something to think about, that we have this many counties, which I think is about the second highest number in the country.
Yeah. Boyle County will put its hand up and say, Jefferson folks can come and take our counties. Try it. We like it. But it does shape this out. In fact, if we had fewer counties, there would be fewer puzzle pieces to try to make this work. Okay, so I'm going to wait on the question about Warren County and the Senate map till I can get to where we're looking at it. This is the current Senate districts. Again, you don't see many maps that look like, Mickey Mouse characters or Rorschach tests. But I will encourage you to take a look, particularly in the East, at the districts that look like long, long strings of pearls. Some of them start at the Tennessee border and make it most of the way to Ohio. And that's a funny thing. Our understanding is a lot of that was districts that didn't have enough population. The senators solved it by adding another county further north. So those are tough districts for voters going to see candidates and hear them speak. They're tough for driving to visit your senator. And that's a kind of recurring pattern. In the Senate map, on this round, there were only 3 divided counties, Fayette with Lexington, Jefferson with Louisville, and Kenton County up near Corbin. For our maps, the first thing I should tell you is we did this in 2 regions. So we're going to focus mainly on the western half of the state, but I can show you some of the eastern half if the questions pull us there. So in the western half, the first thing to know is Warren has an internal district and shares another with that whole set of pink counties, Allen and Butler and Logan and Simpson and Todd. The other divided county on this map is Jefferson, which is of course the big one. And in this map, there are 6 districts that are entirely in Jefferson County There's one shared with Bullitt, there's one shared with Hardin, and there's one shared with Oldham and Shelby. So that's not many divided counties, but it means more combinations. You should be dissatisfied if you look to the west and see that blue district. That's the only combination of counties I could find without having anybody give me permission to divide one more county. And I'll give you a close-up here on Bowling Green. And I see the question, how did you choose which portion was included in the district outside? And the answer was, once I had Bowling Green fairly well included in the blue district, I tried to make the pink district work fairly smoothly for the people in the other counties and for a candidate that might have to drive across, or for a citizen going to visit a candidate who might have to drive across. So I tried for contiguous to the other counties and let the additional blue part be off to the northeast, because that was where there wasn't a county being included in the district. I claim no perfection. I tried to reason as I worked on it, but I may not have gotten it right, and feedback to help me think further about that would be great. I do see Chuck Webb's question. How long have I been doing this kind of volunteering? Cindy Heine, who is also on this call with us, recruited me to look at redistricting in 2017. And last year is when I started working on actually trying to draw the maps. So I'm currently in the study in the attic of my house, and I moved up here for a week and a half to try to learn Maptitude. Let me show you a couple of other details. This is what the Jefferson map looks like. We may well have some transplants who are very interested, but the main thing you can see is from Elizabethtown, it's that same sort of grab hold of the drumstick part of the county that gets added. For Bullitt County, it's a slice moving north, and I'm aiming to stay outside the Gene Snyder Parkway, and then off in the northeast, it's a small section along the river to make that district right. But there is room for Jefferson County to have multiple Senate districts that are entirely their own. And I think this is friendlier to Jefferson County voices being heard than the design we saw from state legislators on the last round. And this is a little closer in. I am really looking forward to Jefferson County feedback on this. In all of these maps, I feel like I'm walking on other people's eggshells, and it will help a lot to get perspectives on what they think will and won't work. We did get some helpful feedback on the previous round saying, you did Newburgh wrong, and I worked on treating Newburgh better in these maps.
And Susan, go back to the map and explain about the highways, because it's very evident in the Jefferson County map, because you can look at the Watterson Expressway.
Yeah. I had a moment in trying to think about people traveling or canvassing or just telling each other where the borders are, when it occurred to me that the really major highways work like very big rivers. It's easier to cross the Watterson than it is to cross the Ohio River, but it's not a lot easier, particularly not if you're working on foot or you're trying to give people directions. So in this map, you really can see if you look to the north and the west, you really can see there are two districts inside the Watterson Expressway. And for part of the map, you can see efforts to follow the Snyder, and I think I can get closer next time. And that's true across all of my efforts to work out counties. My first approximation is trying to get within roads that people can describe to each other. And I am so happy if someone says, yeah, but that's not how it works here. That's how I'll know to do it better.
Is this a good time to look at another couple of questions I don't think have been answered?
Sure.
Okay. This one from Tracy Harkins. Would any of the proposed federal legislation regarding voting rights affect current redistricting efforts?
Yeah, yes, that was the question I jumped to because I love it so much. which is the one where, yes, the bills being proposed include restoring the provision where the US Department of Justice has to approve district lines before some states can enact them. And that would mean what we've had is big gerrymandering done very fast, and then people go to court and it takes 2 and 3 years to get the case fully heard. If we get pre-clearance back, it'll work the way it did in the 2000 redistricting. And legislators can say, here's what we want to do. But if the Justice Department says, you're not treating voters who have historically been denied their rights well, they will get pushed back and have to adjust it to get the new maps approved.
Great, thank you. The next one, the city of Corbin has pieces in 3 counties. And how have you accounted for that? Or how was that decision made?
Oh, it was a tight map. Let me pull back and I'll actually show the map on this because I do have it. Sometimes I get asked a question, and this I believe is a House question. So here's the map. And for those of you who haven't memorized every county in the state, I'm getting close. On the east side of this map, you can see where London is and the district that's entirely in Laurel County. And then there's a yellow district that includes Knox County. And that needs a piece of Laurel County to be a large enough district. And I tried to make that be a heavily Corbin part of the map. I wasn't able to also pull in the part from Whitley because I couldn't think of any legal justification that would let me put a division into Whitley County. And Whitley and Knox are fast growing places. So that might change when we get to 2030. But I was only able to solve for 2. And I'm open to anybody who knows the region arguing, yeah, you should try to put Corbin in the Whitley County district. I did what I could think through, and I'm really very open to input, especially from folks who know that region well. I'm going to pull back into the Senate world.
And you could do this later if you like, but here's the last question that's up right now, and that's when we contact legislators about a fair redistricting process, should we send the League of Women Voters proposed draft redistricting map? Are you ready for that? Or is that for your use only? And actually, so in this case, it would be the maps that are currently on the website.
Yes, these maps are fully public. Folks who want to share them can share them. I wouldn't rate it as our strategy to do that quite yet, because we're hoping to take the maps where we can say we've also gotten a lot of public input. But I wouldn't want to say to anybody, once we make maps available to the whole public, that they can't share them if they want to share a thought about them. I will invite my more senior league members to weigh in on that if they want. Cindy or Dee, do you want to add a thought on that?
No, I would completely agree. I would encourage people, if they have specific requests for their area of the state, to share those with your legislators, because I think we as citizens are going to have some really good ideas that they might take into consideration. So you could share our maps if you want, but I think it would also be good to share your specific ideas about how your maps could be better.
Thank you, Cindy. For those of you, I'm not sure we introduced Cindy at the beginning, but Cindy is the veteran league member who recruited me into this. And as I think held every office the league has to offer. And famously also recruited me into my paid work. So Cindy is in charge of what I do with my life and how I understand Kentucky especially. And she's going to chuckle at me. So now I'd like to invite Dee to step back up and share some thoughts about how to work with this. And if you keep putting questions in the questions, I'm here to keep answering them if they're for me. And Dee, take it away.
All right, thank you, Susan. So this sort of goes with the last question. What can the legislature do to move forward? Well, obviously, what we want, and the host has asked me to start my video, so I think hopefully it's going. in other words, we want them to seek your input, and that's what we're doing. We are trying to get input from everybody and anybody in all of these areas of the state. So comment to them by letter, email, or other ways that you have in communicating with them. For example, I spoke to a Rotary Club today in Bardstown, which has had their legislators come. And so those are good opportunities when you hear that they or see that they are going to be in town and talking to groups to talk with them about this. Let's go to the second part. This is really critical. Share these maps, okay, before they vote on them. So for example, what we don't want to happen is that all of a sudden, all the legislators have maps put on their desks and say, okay, here they are, and we're going to vote tomorrow. Well, obviously, that's not good. It doesn't give them time, if they weren't involved in the drawing of the maps, to look at them. It doesn't give them time to go back to their districts and say, okay, here's what's being proposed, what's good, what's bad, what's okay, what's not okay, what changes do we need to make? We feel like if that's done, if they get citizens' input, if it's done in a transparent way, not in the in the dark room of the Capitol, and the basement somewhere, then you can have broad support that would make this plan bipartisan. That is, that even in this case, the Democrats, who are the minority party in both houses in Kentucky, to support it. And we know that bipartisan support for these redistricting of all of these districts is going to be much better for all of us and for Kentucky, and is a better chance for not having a lawsuits which cost money, lawsuits which delay things and don't always solve the problem that we think that they're going to solve. So that's what the legislature can do, and that's what you can do by contacting them, seeking input, transparency, so we can have this broad support. Ask your legislator for this, just what we've talked about, an open and transparent process. You can send your messages online to the legislature. In other words, you can go on very easily and find out your specific legislator and email them, call them, leave a message, or you can call the sort of what I sort of call the hotline, the 800 number, and they are very good about taking your calls, and they're very polite, and you tell them where you live. They take that information down. You tell them who you want to leave a message for. And what we know is legislators look to those messages. They might say, "Oh, we have 50 green slips supporting this," or "We have 50 green slips against this." So they do get those messages. Then we want you to sign the People Powered Fair Maps petition that's on our website. And let me explain this. This is not a fancy petition that's going to have the Secretary of State's approval and has to have certain numbers. We just want people to speak up through this process of signing a petition that we then will share with the legislators, so that they'll know that people want to have this transparent, open, public input kind of process. So, and one of the things you can do, you can sign it online, but you can also print it out and take it with you to church or to your clubs or with your family and have them sign it. Send it to us. There's an address there. You can send it to us. We're collecting them. We've already collected a lot, but we want to collect a lot more so that they will listen to us. And then you're doing what we want other people to do, attending our Fair Maps forums. And those details and registration information is also on our website. And while you have done this one, which we have done with WKU and Dr. Ardrey's group, you can go and listen to these in all the other places. So the ones that are coming up are in Lexington and Louisville. We're going to have one in Pikeville, Northern Kentucky. And we're working on Moorhead, and we're working on Owensboro and Paducah. So feel free to attend all of these, particularly to get all of your questions answered. Talk to your friends, relatives who might live in other parts of the state and get them to pay attention also. In other words, just what it says there, encourage others to do these things. Keep this in mind, and I want to repeat this. This happens only every 10 years, so good or bad, whether they do a good job of it, whether they think about good government, regardless of who's in power, it's going to last for 10 years. So we're stuck with it, whatever it is. We're going to have it for 10 years. And we need to remember that, because we're going to have to, if it doesn't get any better this year, we're going to have to keep working on this. Also keep this in mind, and I've been saying this to people lately, and that is what happens in Frankfort, which is where these legislators go to make laws. What happens there doesn't stay in Frankfort. It's not like Las Vegas, let whatever happens in Las Vegas stay there. What they do there, it affects all of us. It affects every part of our state. It affects every citizen, every person living in our state. It has to do with taxes, it has to do with schools, hospitals, health. It affects our court system. It affects our roads. Everything that is done in Frankfort affects all of us. So keep those, I think that's critical. It's a 10-year deal, and everything that they do there affects all of us individually and our families, friends, and colleagues. So again, go online, take care of all this. I think this is the last one. We may have one more with some more information. Susan, I don't know if there's another sheet or not. Trying to remember. Yes, good, right. This is how you can reach us. We've sort of talked about it all throughout the program. You can do just what it says as far as our website. You can contact us, info@lwvk.org. You can contact us about these maps. That's the tinyural.com thing there. And that's through November the 15th, because after we collect all this information, just what we've heard tonight, for example, Susan was very forthcoming about what she was trying to do with Corbin, but she wants to hear from people. Also with Bowling Green, she wants to hear from people. Then we're going to do some recommended maps. In other words, we're going to go back to the table and do and basically do a lot of it again. So we do want to hear from you, and there's our phone number also. And then you see the QR code there. We have a program called Outreach Circle, and you can get on the Outreach Circle, and it's a way for you to very quickly get information out to all your contacts, friends, family, colleagues, business people, people in your church, people that you have regular technical contact with. You can use this QR code. So we certainly thank you for being here tonight and having all these questions, and please continue to send us questions. This recording event will be posted online. In other words, we recorded this entire event, and if you want to go back and look at it again, which will help you with some more questions, feel free to do so, and you can get it online on our website. Thank you.
We have one more quick question.
Okay, we'll take it.
In the next round of maps that you draw, can you provide zoomed in versions for Kentucky House seats without any overlay of text? It's hard to see some precincts and blocks in the current maps. Susan, can you explain your challenge?
Probably not on this. This is a really good feedback that some of my zoom ins aren't zoomed close enough. I can do an additional level of close-up to get even closer. And anyone who has spotted that problem, please let me know. Because if you tell me this is the map where we couldn't see, that'll help me be more intentional about meeting that problem. Using District R, which is a wonderful program because it's free and it does color, its weaknesses are it is determined to put the city names on everything, and it doesn't put the county names on anything. So it's not perfect. Maptitude will label the counties right, and Maptitude will allow any level of zoom in and let me turn off the labels. But Maptitude sprung a software glitch at the clinch moment when I had to get the maps done, which is why I switched. So please do let me know where I need to do better close-ups. And I appreciate that feedback, and I'll appreciate anything deeper that the person who shared that can send to me.
Okay, I think there was there also a question about how to get to the recorded version, and they can do that on our website. It'll be there in a few days. And I hope that answers that question. Karen, Wida, Cindy, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, again, thank you. Thanks to all of you for tuning into this, taking the time. This is really what the league is all about as far as educating people about all of the political processes that are involved that affect all of us. From voting rights, obviously, yes, we register voters, but that's not the only thing we do. We're all about educating voters about all of the issues that are going on and that affect all of us. So again, thank you for your time, and thank you, Dr. Ardrey, and for Western Kentucky University for co-hosting this.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And I just wanted to reiterate that this process of redistricting is so crucial. Like you said, it only comes about every 10 years. And we already know that change will not come easy. It's always a tough political battle. So let's take action and contact our legislators. So on behalf of the Political Engagement Project, thank you, League of Women Voters of Kentucky, for allowing us to partner with you as we lobby for this map, for this fair map for the state of Kentucky. And thank you, webinar attendees. We had over 50, that's great. And with so many activities and events that scream for our attention, it really is encouraging to see so many of you show up and participate in our democracy. So thank you very much. And again, thank you very much and good night.